afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ed Harris, administrator of the Brock International Prize in Education. And I'd like to tell you, I'll tell you a little bit more about the prize as we go on, but 3 institutions partner in this prize. University of Tulsa, Oklahoma State University, and the University of Oklahoma. And while the selection of the laureate occurs in the fall of each year, we're now doing that in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This symposium is alternated among the 3 partner universities. So it's this year it is University of Oklahoma's turn to host this, and so I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Jim Pappas, who will give you an official OU welcome. Dr. Pappas serves as the Vice President for University Outreach, Dean of the College of Liberal Studies, and Professor, Departments of Educational Psychology and Liberal Studies at the University of Oklahoma. Dr. Pappas is also a member of the Brock Prize Executive Board, and so it's obviously a great supporter of the prize. So it's an honor for me to introduce you to Dr. Jim Pappas.
Well, thank you, Ed. Obviously, from Ed's introduction, you realize that here at the University of Oklahoma, we get more titles than salary. So that's one of the things that President Bourne's pretty good about, is convincing you maybe that another title is better than any increase in salary. But those of you who are in education understand that. But on behalf of President Bourne and the faculty and staff of the University of Oklahoma, I am certainly pleased and excited to welcome you to this symposium and to the activities related to the Brock Prize in Education. As we all know, education at all levels is currently facing dramatic change. From the technological changes in the learning environment to coping with critical constituents, we in education are facing challenges as never before. In this era of turbulence, it is particularly important that we seek innovative ideas and best practices to help us in better meeting the learning and developmental needs of the young people with whom we are entrusted. For that reason, I am particularly thankful to John and Donnie Brock for establishing this International Prize in Education. This prize has allowed us here in Oklahoma to reach across the nation to bring to our state significant innovative practices and understandings of the field that allows us to improve education, teaching, and schools in our state and certainly across the nation. It allows us to identify models and modifications to the educational process and extend those to our state's teachers, and through the new website of the Brock Prize, to teachers and administrators seeking to do their jobs better worldwide. Having, as Ed indicated, the privilege of serving on the Brock Prize board and being involved from the very beginning, I have watched and been inspired by the laureates as they have created exciting new approaches to helping young people from preschool to university, helping those young people to grow and develop, and using these approaches to create a significantly educated citizenry, which is imperative if we are to remain a free nation. For that reason, I want to once again thank John and Donnie Brock for using their resources in this way to help those of us who are in the field of education. I am particularly excited about this year's laureate, Ellen Moyer. I am, by discipline, a counseling psychologist, and recently chose to complete a coaching certificate at Columbia University. The reason I did that is the faculty in our college are working at developing a new coaching certificate that will be used as part of our administrative leadership program. In preparing for the curriculum for that coaching certificate, what we have done is we've gone out and had focus groups with corporate and governmental leaders across the state to ask them, what do we really need to do to ensure that administrative coaches and leaders can do a better job in their organization. And to a person, they said that the most universally appropriate activity is that of mentoring. And they suggested that mentoring across all organizational sectors is critical if we are to socialize and prepare young professionals in their fields. That induction process seems to be critical in establishing the base for effective performance in any professional endeavor. And I know that it is especially important in teaching. Part of the reason I know that is the result of having a daughter who is a social science and special education teacher in the state. I readily remember the challenges that she faced as a new first-year teacher starting her career. I'm sure you've talked about it already and we'll talk about it more, but I clearly remember that she understood the content of her history classes and had engaged in practice teaching, but I'm not sure that that had prepared her effectively for what she faced as a first-year teacher. I vividly remember that first year, her struggles and challenges for which the collegiate classroom had not prepared her completely. From the vocal concerns of parents, to the demands for classroom discipline, to the school politics, to the community questions about education, she was immersed daily in dealing with a new set of learning experiences with which she had to cope. Had she not had the mentors and colleagues who helped her in that process, I do not think she would have been sustained in her career. And as a parent, to this day, I'm very pleased and excited that those mentors helped her. And so when I see the work that the laureate has done, I know it is a special part of that process of becoming a teacher. So I thank Laureate Moyer and many of you in this classroom who reach out and assist those young teachers as they are socialized in the profession. On behalf of the University of Oklahoma, we are pleased and excited to continue to support the work of John and Donnie Brock, and now of Ellen Moyer, in helping educational professionals to emerge as more mature and effective teachers. Thank you for joining us.
The Brock Prize is given annually to a person who has an innovative idea that makes a difference in the world. And it's not just about an idea, it's about an idea that makes a difference. And as I mentioned earlier, the first part of the process is the jury deliberations. And we have jurors come from all over literally this last time, all over the world to come deliberate. They present a case for their juror. And believe me, we had some outstanding nominees. You'll learn more about what Ellen ideas and how it does make a difference in just a few moments. But for now, I'd like to just recognize our 2014 Brock International Prize in Education laureate, Ellen Moyer. This is the second part of the process. So in the fall, we deliberate, and the jury comes up with a winner, and we have a great winner. And this is the second part where we disseminate her idea, not only to Oklahoma, but to the world. And so the purpose of this symposium is really twofold: to focus on Ellen's ideas and best practices, and then to discuss and explore as a group how those ideas and practices can be applied to various educational settings. So that's why we're here for, and I have no doubt it's going to be a great day. But before we begin, there is another person I would like to introduce, and Jim mentioned him, but if it weren't for this person, we wouldn't be here for this event today. John Brock is a native Oklahoman, attended school not far from here in Oklahoma City, and he graduated from here, from University of Oklahoma, with a degree in geological engineering. He's been very successful in numerous oil and gas ventures, and however, through word and deed, John and his wife Donnie demonstrate their dedication to make our society a better place to live. And you don't have to be around John too long to know that a key in that is education. And so I'd like to introduce you to the founder and benefactor of the Brock International Prize in Education, John Brock. John, would you please stand? The process today will include 2 panel discussions, and then between those discussions will be Ellen's presentation. But before Ellen's presentation, we wanted to give the room and the people joining us in the webinar sort of a feel of first year, what it's like to be a first-year educator. So at this time, I'd like our first panel to come to the stage. And so would you please, if you're on our first panel. And while they're here, this will be an interactive process. And so we don't want any lingering questions to just be floating around, but we want to know what your comments and what your questions are. So throughout today's program, we will accept questions from our live audience as well as those who are watching online. To submit a question, simply text or email us the following instructions at the bottom of the screen. And for those, we will have those. And for those of you at the live event, instructions are also printed on the cards found at your seats. So your questions will be transmitted electronically to our discussion moderators, who will in turn present as many of them as possible to our main speaker or panel. And so you may begin submitting those at any time. At this time, I'd like to introduce our first panel. To my immediate right, not to my right here is a moderator, but one seat over, is Hannah Kermanshahi. And Hannah is from Tulsa, Oklahoma. She's a TU graduate, and she's an English teacher in Union High School. She teaches, 6th and 7th grade center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So Hannah, we're so glad to have you here. Next to Hannah is another TU grad, Ariel Toulouse, and she teaches 3rd grade at Lee Elementary in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Ariel came all the way from New York to help us in education. So she came a long way, and I'm sure it's for the pay that we have here in Oklahoma. Next to Ariel is Emily Sewell, and Emily is, she's not here. Okay. All right. And then next to Ariel is an OU graduate, Lindy Cox. She came all the way from Moore, Oklahoma, so from Moore, New York here. And she's a social studies teacher at Whittier Middle School in Norman, Oklahoma. And then we have Laura Chitwood, who is from Tulsa. Are you from Tulsa? Okay. And you're a 1st grade teacher at Reagan Elementary in Norman, Oklahoma. And then we're very pleased to have not only a group of outstanding first-year educators or beginning educators, but a more experienced educator who is in Ellen's mentoring program. In fact, this is her 3rd year. And Claire Robertson, who's a new teacher mentor at Tulsa Public Schools. Our moderator for this panel discussion is Dr. Greg Garn, Dean of the Janine Rainbolt College of Education, as well as the Executive Director of the K-20 Center for Educational and Community Renewal. I've worked with Greg in a variety of ventures here in Oklahoma. One thing I love about Greg is that he loves to collaborate. He's a great team player, and so we can sit across the field during Saturdays and root for our respective teams, but then during the rest of the week we can work together to improve education in Oklahoma. So I present to you my friend and colleague, Greg Garn.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I think one of the things you got sort of a quick glimpse of is really a wonderful diversity on this panel. You've got geographical, you've got grade level, a lot of different cuts at what education looks like. And I think that's part of what we've been able to hear today is the incredible complexity around what we're trying to do in being more effective, fundamentally, whatever else the noise is out there, being more effective in educating the kids in our classroom. And so I appreciate the fact that the Brock Prize had the wisdom to create this panel of first-year teachers, because I think so oftentimes we have an idea, we outside of that experience of a first-year teacher have an idea about what that problem might be or what that opportunity might be or what that sort of level of excellence is. But to actually get it directly from our first-year teachers, I think is a powerful way to start this conversation. So with that, I'd maybe like to begin, and we'll just kind of work our way through here with a little insight into your first year. If there's maybe a sort of a particular insight that you have about, again, focused around your experience, positive, negative, or otherwise, let's maybe start the conversation there, and then we will dive into some questions from there. So do you want to begin with maybe a positive or negative experience that you've had in your first year?
Sure. So yes, I teach 7th grade language arts at Union in Tulsa. And I think that one of my greatest challenges is obviously my class sizes. I have so many students. Day one, I think that I was prepared to create a seating chart for my students, for instance, so that they would know exactly where to sit when they came in, because this is sort of classic Harry Wong. The students need to know what's expected of them, and you have to create order. Well, day one, I did not have enough desks for my students. So some of my students were, sitting in beanbags on my floor. And just knowing I really wanted to create an environment that was safe and orderly, and especially knowing how much 7th graders can be extremely self-conscious and embarrassed, and for them to come in on their first day of school and for me to have to ask them would it be okay if you sat on a beanbag for the first couple weeks or so until we get a desk for you? That's a challenge for me. I think that's sort of a specific example of the broader challenge of having an idea of how I want to conduct my classroom, but then being hit with reality of logistics. And one of those things is simply having a lot of students and not as many resources as they deserve, and as I feel that I need to be an effective teacher. So that's one of my challenges. As far as successes, my classroom essentially is a reading and writing workshop, and so I can point to a few moments where I was able to connect a student with a really reluctant reader with a book that he or she ended up really enjoying. And when I think about those moments, those are the moments that make me, want to keep going, and that I have to remember when I'm feeling discouraged, I guess. So, yeah.
I'm going to start with a success. So one of the greatest successes that I've had, I feel like I can turn to my coworkers and my colleagues and really find a lot of support. As a first-year teacher, I started in December of 2012, so technically 1 year and 3 month teacher. The other third grade teachers have been really helpful with their resources and different ideas on how to teach certain topics, and it's been really nice to not feel like, I heard someone make a comment once saying something like, oh, do your teachers let you use their resources, or do they kind of keep them for themselves? And I thought, well, of course they share them with me. Why would they try and keep them to themselves? And, it surprised me to hear that not every school is like that, and not every teacher has the same experience. So it's been really nice to, share resources and talk back and forth. And also on top of that, I've been able to, if I have a question, I'm not afraid to say, I don't know how to do A, B, C, or D. What are your suggestions? So, whether that be to the counselor, to the principal, to other teachers, even maybe to the PE teacher, just really using all of the resources available within the building has been really quite helpful. In terms of a challenge, I would say as a third grade teacher, it's definitely all the state mandated and district mandated tests this year. So this year, my third graders, my 8 and 9-year-olds, are taking, the majority of them will be taking 18 tests in the computer lab. And each test is about an hour and a half. We have allotted in our computer lab, and we're very fortunate to have a computer lab and to have the technology available to allow these tests to function usually quite smoothly. So when we do all the math on that, it ends up being almost 3 weeks of our 2-hour reading block time. So, trying to catch up on that instruction time when we've missed about 3 weeks of reading instruction, the date of the OCCT does not change. So that's been a challenge. But again, it's been nice to be able to collaborate with other teachers and we're all in the same boat. We're all, you have to do these tests, and we all help each other prepare our own students.
And I think you and I have had a fairly similar experience as far as being in a school that is collaborative, and I think the culture of your school very much affects your experience, because I know I've talked to other first-year teachers who have very, very different experiences and are at kind of the end of their rope, where you asked me in August how I felt. I was feeling overwhelmed, and I felt all the challenges as well, but I was able to navigate those because I come from a school that is very collaborative and makes me feel like I can ask questions. I don't need to be perfect right off. I should be striving for that, but they don't expect me to not make mistakes, and I can ask questions. And I was paired with a mentor teacher who I was lucky again, and I'm working at the school that I was student teaching at. So my cooperating teacher became my mentor teacher, so we got to continue our collaborative relationship that we already had. So I would say my biggest success, or the most positive experience of my first year, is due to the school that I am in and the culture there that allows me, even though I am new, to try new things or to question. Also the way it's set up, we have teams where, or a core that has, so all of my students have the same science teacher, the same English teacher, so I can go to them and say, this is what I'm seeing with this student. Are you having the same problem? Maybe not. Then what's the issue in my class, or what's the issue in your class that is different? How can we work together? So just having a collaborative environment. My biggest challenge, I think, was adjusting to, from being a student teacher, you maybe think you have classroom experience, you've been in the classroom. It is totally not the same thing when those parent emails are directed towards you, and they're wondering, my student has always had an A, why do they have a B? And, trying to talk about those things and lay out your expectations and help those students adjust to those and help the parents understand. Those were the biggest challenges, but having that community to fall back on. If I had not had that, I might be one of the teachers that's at the point where they don't know why am I doing this, what is my role in this profession, and they've helped me see that this is kind of, you're coming into your own, you're challenging yourself. It's going to be a challenge, but I'm starting now to see the payoff of that, seeing student improvement and seeing even my students say, thank you, I've learned so much from you, and I really appreciate it, and that's what makes the challenge worth it.
Yeah, and kind of to go off what they said, I, just like you did, I came in at December, so I've taught for a semester, and now I'm on my first full year. Coming in at semester is really hard, I'm sure. Yeah. You come into a classroom that already has things established, and you're the new teacher, and you have to take that over, and that was really hard for me. This new year, I have a very, very supportive team that works really well together, and if I didn't have that, I don't think I would be where I am today. It is so important, I think, to have someone to say, hey, this is what I was thinking. Is this how you would do it? What would you do? And just have those different ideas bouncing back and forth. One of my challenges, I think, would be time management. There's just so much to get done in a day. And having a supportive team, I was able to say, how are you getting this done? You always get your science and your social studies taken care of. How are you doing this? And just having them tell me like, well, I do a science center, so that takes care of the worksheet for that day or the activity for that day. So I think having a supportive team has really benefited me as a first-year teacher.
I am a mentor. I don't think you want to hear about my first year teaching 29 years ago. But I will tell you about our program that started. This is our third year. Tulsa Public Schools took a leap of faith and decided that they would release 8 veteran teachers to work with our new teachers. And I personally had a wonderful job. I love teaching, as do my fellow mentors. I think if you spoke to any one of them, they would tell you that it was a hard decision to leave the classroom because we all love it so much. But that passion has now transferred to what we do. It's that passion that helps us support. You've heard from almost every one of these panelists that they needed support. And that's our job. There are 8 of us, and we service, right now we have 137 teachers on our roll. We work with core curriculum. We would love to work with more than that, but budgets being what they are, we are working through the cores. I work with approximately 18 teachers. I visit them weekly. We spend an hour to an hour and a half. I can't tell you the challenges. The challenges are their challenges. We're trying to support them through that. The great joys that we have are those successes, those times where when the teachers become down or they're feeling overwhelmed because they come so ready and so full of excitement and energy, and then the reality hits them. And we all know a reality with any job is tough, but we know that a reality in the classroom, especially in an urban school district such as Tulsa Public Schools, that the culture that they're having to deal with is one that they may have not been trained for. Or if they've been trained for that, they haven't had the opportunity to really work with that. So it's our job. It's our job to support those teachers, and really our job is to help with our students. So as the mentors, we are no longer teaching, but we're supporting the new teachers as they support their students. It is truly the most remarkable job I've ever had, working with these young people, like you see here, these wonderful young people.
I think that's a sort of a great example of sort of a framework for support. And one of the common themes that we heard across all of these answers is the idea of a positive culture, right? What is that way that we can, not just in a one-off, we happen to hit off a relationship with an individual mentor-teacher, but how do you actually structure that? And one of the things that I think a lot of us in this room think about is how can a preparation program try to prepare people as best as possible for making that leap from pre-service teacher to in-service teacher. And so maybe the sort of the next question relates to how did your undergraduate preparation, whatever that looked like, prepare you, and where are some opportunities for that to get better in preparing you for that classroom? And before we take that question, I think Emily has been able to join us. So come on up. We've got a seat up here right for you. So you actually might be the perfect one to start this, as you're sort of in that student teaching experience. Maybe talk a little bit about that experience, and then we'll make the pivot to some of the other panelists as they're in the first year. Just talk a little bit about your experience student teaching and sort of the preparation that you have to jump into that classroom as a full-time teacher.
Okay. Well, I am an agricultural education student teacher. So our system is set up fairly differently from the College of Education and how secondary and primary teachers do their student teaching. We have 3 days of teaching in our junior year that we go out into a school and we prepare a lesson plan and teach that, but it's only 3 days that semester. And then our final semester, we spend 4 weeks on block where we prepare an entire unit and basically have a crash course on everything we've learned about agriculture. And then we spend the next 12 weeks in the classroom. And the spring semester is definitely a very busy semester when it comes to career development event contest and speech contest and livestock shows, and having quite a bit of curriculum to cover in the classroom as well. So I just finished up my 4th week, and I am almost to a full load of teaching underneath my cooperating teacher. And I would say with our situation, we are fairly familiar with the schedule that we're going to have, but we're definitely put into the classroom at a time where we are going to be balancing being out of the classroom and making sub-lesson plans, but also making sure we're teaching in the classroom and giving curriculum and giving tests, which I gave my first one today after my first unit. And I've been teaching the unit for about 3 weeks since we've been in and out of the classroom a lot for livestock shows. So it's definitely my experience. We're put in a very real-life situation where we definitely, like you guys were saying, your beginning jitters and the passion that you have, we're able to have that, but also be able to put in that real-life situation, so we're not completely as shocked whenever it comes full round, I guess, when we get our first teaching job. So that's kind of how our student teaching block goes and where I'm at on mine so far.
Great. Hannah, would you talk a little bit about your experience?
Sure. I would say that, without a doubt, the most invaluable part of my experience in undergrad was obviously student teaching, which we do full-time our final semester at TU. And I would say that while that semester was really challenging, obviously, I'd say the more field experience that undergrads could possibly get in an actual school environment, really working alongside of a teacher in a classroom, the better. I think that is without a doubt, that's just the thing that helped me more than anything to predict what my circumstances would be like as a teacher.
Yeah, I agree that any field experience you get, the more, the better. So my experience, I had a work-study job off campus from freshman through my senior year, and I was lucky enough to work in an elementary school. I worked at Kendall Whittier Elementary School, so I was in a classroom basically as a teacher's helper for 4 years, and then upon graduation I had all of this experience, and I had the confidence going into my student teaching that I'd been in the classroom before, and obviously a teacher's helper is not the same as when you're actually doing the entire student teaching on your own, but that really helped to prepare me. Also, the TU program, you split the semester, so one semester, I'm at elementary education, so one semester had to be 1 through 3, grades 1 through 3, and the second half of the semester had to be grades 4 through 6. So, you got to experience both levels of the elementary education scale. You don't know what jobs will be offered upon graduation, and if you've only worked in a first grade class and the only option is a 6th grade teacher, you're not going to be so quick to jump on that job if you have no experience with the older kids. So that really, that helped a lot to get, I student taught in 2nd grade and 5th grade, and now I'm in 3rd grade, so it kind of gave me a good idea.
We're going to sound a little bit like a broken record, I feel like, because that is my thing too, is that the most influential experience to me was the student teaching, but I've already even said student teaching, while it gives you a good idea, is still not the same as when you are the sole teacher in the room. And so I feel like maybe from the very beginning, though there are challenges with that, being exposed to classroom procedure, being involved, and maybe even coming up with, for elementary and early childhood students that I knew, a lot of them did have jobs that were still in the field. For secondary, maybe coming up with some ways for us to be involved as a work-study program or something after school programs would be good to get us some feedback and get us in there and getting our feet wet before we did several field experiences, which we had hours of observation that we had to do, but that's mostly observation. I would help a little bit, but you could really only help as much as your cooperating teacher would really allow you to jump in there, and some were more willing than others to hand over the reins to, I don't know, an early 20-something in their classroom with little experience. So student teaching, I was very, again, lucky to have a good cooperating teacher that kind of just threw me in there, and I got a lot of experience. However, it still didn't completely prepare me for that sole responsibility, and I don't know if anything really can, but basically more is better.
I agree with everything they said. Student teaching, I mean, you don't know what it's like to be a teacher till you actually do it. Something else that I was able to do through my time at OU is I joined different clubs. And those clubs would have actual teachers come in and tell you, this is what it's like to be a teacher. And so I think that was something that was very beneficial to me, and I would love to see that for everyone. Like, even in classes, bring teachers in. Like, if you're in a reading class, bring a reading teacher in and have that reading teacher explain to you what it looks like to have a reading block and hands-on things with an actual current teacher, so you can kind of know what's going on out there right now.
Claire, I might ask you, what do you see as sort of the top challenges that your new teachers are facing?
That's a really good question. Through Ellen's New Teacher Center, we are all trained, and through the research they've done, it matches up with what we see, and what we see is teachers who are not schooled in cultural diversity. The student teaching that they've done may not be in the areas that they are going to be placed in a school that ethnicity is varied, largely Hispanic schools, schools with large African American population, and the cultural norms that those students have that the teachers don't understand. Because for the majority of them, and I know that that's a sweeping statement, but for the majority of our teachers, they themselves did not come from that kind of background. So we see them struggling with that diversity, which shows up in setting up classroom procedures. What procedures are appropriate for this classroom? What is appropriate for a largely Hispanic classroom? What kind of cultural world do they come from? What do they bring with them? So those procedures. Also, building those relationships with our students is probably the most important thing that we do as mentors, is we remind them that data is so important, but knowing your students is the most important thing that you can do within those first few weeks of school. Once you know your students and they have that trust built up and that respect, it just changes so much. But truly, it's that cultural diversity that we see them struggling with the most.
And so, Laura, maybe start with you on this, and then we'll work back this way. But to kind of connect the dots a little bit, I think one of the things we clearly heard is more is better. But if we sort of push that even a little further and maybe even connect it into our conversation this morning, it's even a little more complex than that. It's not just more, but it's what are the opportunities to think about working with a mentor to help them unpack, to help you understand, how do I work with this level of diversity? How do I work with the differentiated levels of instruction within this classroom? How do I, so it's and I'll just tell you sort of a quick story from our practice here at the University of Oklahoma, is for a long time we've been focused on the number of hours of our sort of internship. And so basically we did an audit a couple of years ago. And if you look at our programs, it's between 600 and over 1,000 hours of classroom experience by the time they graduate. And that's we kind of looked at that number and we thought, wow. But the more that we looked at that number, an observation hour is not the same as a student teaching hour. And so what we've continued to do is to think very carefully about not just a big number, but a very powerful ability when you get that hour or a couple of hours in a real classroom. How do you take that back and talk about that? And so the next question that I want to sort of move through is specifically thinking about your mentors, either formal or informal. Who are the people that you work with to think about, boy, I saw this issue today, and I'm just not sure if I handled it correctly, or if I see it again, how can I be better at it? Laura, would you get us started on that?
Yeah, I have an unofficial mentor at my school. She's also a first grade teacher, so she's someone that she's really great to if I'm having like problems with curriculum or anything like that. She's awesome to go to. She's been teaching first grade for a long time, so I'm very thankful to have her. I also, through OU, have a mentor, and that's been really nice to have an outside mentor, just because it's a non-biased opinion, and I can say, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, what do you think about this? And she doesn't have any preconceived notions about the school or about any of that. And so I think it's really great to have someone inside your school with you on your, I mean, it doesn't have to be on your team, but someone that knows what you're going through at your school, but also someone outside that can be there to kind of say, it's okay, you're doing fine, just keep going, and kind of bring information in for you. So I think it's really important to have both aspects of that.
Yeah, I think having a variety of people to talk to, maybe not just one person. I have my cooperating teacher from last year who is now my mentoring teacher. I go to her a lot, especially if it's about the curriculum, because we teach the same thing. So I'm going, does this make sense? Does this seem like it's too overwhelming? I mean, I know my students better than she does because we have a different group, but I'm saying, you know, does this look good? What can I do to tweak this, make it better? What are you doing in your classroom today? Sometimes we'll be doing exactly the same thing. Sometimes it's a little different depending on the schedule. I talk to the English teacher next door to me a lot because we see a lot of the same students. So again, I mentioned if a particular student is struggling in my class, are they struggling in other classes or is it just my class? What is the disconnect? Really using, again, I come from a school that is very open to that, just walking and kind of talking to each other. I've talked to the principal, I've talked to the counselors, I've talked to people who don't even teach on my same grade level, but they've had the student in the past, so maybe they have a better track record of their history. So really using any resource that is available to you, as long as you are working in an environment that supports that, you can use anyone that
I think I'm hearing that sort of powerful idea of culture and collaboration and community again. And so, Ariel, I'd maybe modify this just a little bit for you. What role does leadership in your building play in this process of the mentoring that you've gotten?
The leadership does play a large role in the mentoring that we receive at Lee Elementary. I have the benefit of working in Tulsa Public Schools, and as a first-year teacher, I had mentors through the Tulsa Public Schools new teacher mentor program, which was nice to have experienced teachers come in and kind of give you their feedback or kind of bounce ideas back and forth and, you know, hear their suggestions, whether it be a seating chart, whether it be, you know, curriculum-based. And the mentor program also provided informal observations to kind of give you, you know, clues on how to, tips and pointers on how to improve your teaching techniques so that when the principal evaluations start happening, you know, it's not such a shock and you know what you're working toward and you know what you need to improve on. So that was very helpful. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that's perfect. Again, I think again, connecting to our conversation earlier today, there's some clear expectations for sort of TLE and understanding what rubric we use to evaluate teachers. And so certainly in preparation programs, but then also when teachers are in that classroom for the first year, working with leaders to understand very clearly what those expectations are so that we can get better over time, I think is just a perfect one. Again, maybe focus a little on leadership and whether it's the leadership at the district office or at the building level. How have they helped to mentor your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Ariel, I've had we have an instructional coach at my school she's there specifically to support the language arts teachers because we're implementing a new curriculum that not all the teachers have had experience with. And so she has really helped me in a lot of ways. Similarly, she's observed me a couple of times before my actual evaluator has come so that she can give me that informal observation and give me some feedback without actually evaluating me on it so that I feel more prepared for my actual evaluation. And then in a lot of ways, she's helped me even specifically. Sometimes I would read the unit of study in our curriculum, and I felt that it was really nebulous, and I kind of understood certain aspects of it but didn't understand how I would create lessons and how I would assess my students on a particular unit of study, and she would actually come during my plan period and help me plan actual lessons so that I could be teaching what the administration was really expecting me to teach.
With mine, we have, I get daily evaluations back on my time in the classroom from my cooperating teacher, and that's very beneficial for me because as I'm teaching, I can then go to her. I have two of the same class. I have two Ag 1 students. So in my first hour, I teach the first set, and then in my second hour, I teach the second. And she fills out an evaluation on both forms. So after my first hour, I can talk to her and say, this is what I thought went well, what do you think went well, and very much have that back and forth that you do with that evaluation. And then I can change it for my second hour, and then we also have that same conversation after. And then we have a university supervisor that will come and evaluate us twice during the semester. And so he will then again have that same situation where he talks to me about that lesson and how that class day went, but then also check up on the entire student teaching process that we're going through, so our living situations and how we're getting along with our students, and really kind of going more in depth than the normal conversation I have with Ms. Tague.
Claire, one of the issues that I think we've gotten into is this idea that sort of mentoring is not monolithic. There's a variety of different elements within that concept. It might be social emotional support, it might be instructional support, it might be a number of other things. Maybe talk a little bit about how you've thought structurally how to support teachers in those different ways and how that sort of plays out in the district.
Well, through the program by which we are trained, Ellen's program, we have several tools that we use for those purposes, and we are trained in all those areas as well. So I mentioned knowing your students. So one of the things that we talk about is how we get, they list out their students. What do you know about these kids? What do you know about their home lives? What do you know about the community in which they live? We also spend a lot of time with talking to them about data. We analyze the data, but then we take that data and we make it very useful. We talk about, okay, now we have this information. This is what your students are doing. This is what they missed. So how do you go back and differentiate that instruction? Differentiation, we've discovered a lot of our teachers think that differentiation is just putting students in groups and having them work in a group together, and that's not what it is. How can you truly almost make it an individual learning plan for each one of your students to talk about what do they really need? How do you need to change these things? What best fits their learning styles? So we spent a lot of time talking about learning styles, obviously Bloom's taxonomy, urging our teachers to work at that higher level and introduce them to the bigger ideas. Common Core clearly is part of what we work with. We have to train our teachers on what that means. They're scared, and it's not scary. But when somebody hands you a list of things and said, this is what you have to do, and it looks so humongous, we work with them on breaking that down. Wait a minute, what we're really asking you to do is ask your students to think and to think for themselves. So that has an odd social emotional side to it, because the teachers discover, and you as educators understand, that sometimes students don't know what they think. They have a hard time finding that voice. So as a mentor, we help the teachers find their voice and own that, and then they transfer that to their students. So I don't know if I answered your question.
I think that's a great answer, and again, I think that illustrates almost that very first point that we made in here. Is this is such a complex work that we're doing in trying to educate students that projects like this really allow a much more systematic implementation, that it's not just a one-off solution that works beautifully in this school and doesn't apply in others, but there's strong data that shows this is the kind of support that we can give our most vulnerable teachers in their first year, and not just hope that things work out, but there's actually some things that we know and can implement to make sure that they work out much more effectively. I think with that, we're out of time. Would you help me to just acknowledge this great panel up here?
Um, all right, it's not often that almost all my board members are in the same room, but they are now, and except for one. And so I want to introduce the board of the Brock Prize. And you met Dr. Jim Pappas, but Jim is Vice President, University Outreach, and Dean of the College of Liberal Studies. So thank you, Jim. We also have with us Roger Blaze, Provost and Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs, University of Tulsa. Yes. Not with us today, but she will be with us tonight is Dr. Pam Fry, Interim Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at Oklahoma State. We also have Robert Kahn Davis Undiano, Executive Director of the World Literature Today, Presidential Professor of English. He'll be up here. I have the greatest board in the world to work with. They're collaborative. When it comes around to I know they have multiple things to do. When it comes down to the Brock Prize, they make room for us. Now, they may make everybody feel that way. I don't know, but they sure make me feel that way. And so I really appreciate this. Also, the first administrator of the Brock Prize is here today, Trent Gabert, and over in the corner. I just build on what Trent does, and so have a little bracelet, what would Trent do? And so, as I mentioned last fall, the jury selected our 2014 laureate. Each juror made a strong case for his or her nominee. One of the strongest impassioned cases came from Frank Hernandez. And the thing that Frank did, interesting, what I've learned about Ellen is stories are so important. Teacher stories, her story. And so what Frank did, we had all these multimedia presentations and everything, and Frank told Ellen's story and told it very passionately, eloquently, and in a pool of very, very strong nominees, Ellen came to the fore. So I'd like to introduce you to the Brock Prize juror who nominated Ellen. It's Frank Hernandez. Yes, come on now. I'm sorry. Yes. I have my script, and they don't have my script, I guess. So, and Frank is going to introduce Ellen.
Good afternoon. It is with great pride and pleasure that I introduce to you the 2014 Brock Prize in Education laureate, Ellen Moyer. Most of you know that Ellen is the founder and the chief executive of the New Teacher Center. She has focused her career in improving student learning by accelerating the effectiveness of new teachers and school leaders. But what can I tell you about this exceptional individual that you don't know? Ellen has a strong work ethic. She has high standards and an intellectual curiosity that is balanced with sensitivity, good judgment, and a sense of humor. She is an experienced teacher that is passionate about diversity and equity. From the first day that I met Ellen, she was reflective about her own teaching and learning journey. She was compassionate toward those of us who are working in teaching, education, and leadership. Despite everything that she has accomplished, Ellen also knows humility, an essential virtue necessary for authentic and successful relationships with students, colleagues, and school communities. She loves to travel, whether it's setting up a tent in a campground or staying at a five-star hotel. She loves being in nature, hiking, and camping. She loves reading mystery books, attending music concerts, especially jazz concerts, and working on crossword puzzles and playing bridge. She is also very thankful for those that have supported her through the years, especially her husband and her son. Both have been incredibly important to her and have provided her the kind of grounding and balance that has allowed Ellen to do this important work. She is so thankful and appreciative for their love and support as she has built out this important work with her colleagues to ensure that every child every day gets the very best teacher. Please join me in welcoming Ellen Moyer.
Absolutely honored to be here with all of you, and I sincerely want to thank John Brock and his wife, Donnie, for investing in the profession that we all believe in, that really lifts the lives of young people. And, you know, I said this earlier today, if the whole country cared about teachers and education the way that John and Donnie do, we'd be really soaring. And teachers would be the rock stars of America. And we know, actually, we are. You are. So never in my wildest dreams, as I grew up in Monterey, California, to a mother and father who loved me, but a mother who'd not graduated from high school and a father barely, that someday I would be standing in front of you and be with you to be able to say that a teacher made the biggest difference in my life. Miss Hayward is her name, and I'd wanted for decades and decades to thank her because she recognized in me, she knew me well, and she listened, and she knew, and she said that I spoke Spanish better than almost as good as a native speaker, and might I not consider being a bilingual teacher. That lift for me has propelled my career and is really why I'm here with you today. So I am a firm believer in teachers, the power of teachers, the capabilities that we bring to lift the lives of our students. And I dream that one day, seriously, we'll be compensated and acknowledged in the way that John Brock and Donnie have acknowledged me. So I think that, you know, when we think about teachers, I think as each of you are in the room, you can think about a teacher that made a difference in your life. We forget the power of teachers, and it's so essential that we realize that education is the democracy of our foundation. It's the grand equalizer in this country. And we need to be sure that not just my kids find, but that we own every child in this country. That regardless of the zip code that a young person lives in, he or she is going to be assured a top quality teacher and a top quality education. I'm counting on each of you here and all of those that are watching to help make this a reality across America. You know, it was a pleasure to listen to the new teachers and to Claire, and it was especially a treat to me because I feel that in order to be propelled and to keep this work going, I need to hear the voices of new teachers. I need to know that the work we're doing is actually important to them. Many of you are in pre-service. I began my journey in pre-service. First I was a bilingual teacher, and then I directed student teaching and eventually teacher education at UC Santa Cruz. And I was haunted by the fact that in October of the first year, many of my graduates would call me on the phone, some sobbing, some saying, I never thought the teaching was going to be like this. And one of you said something that really sparked this for me. One time, a young person called me, a teacher, and said, oh my God, and I have parent complaints. And a student students are misbehaving. I never thought that would happen. Now, I remember being that teacher. I remember being like all of you up here before us. Like I was going to do it better than anyone else in America. And that's how you feel. That's what it feels like when we're ready to go and launch our careers. We have a moral obligation to the teachers in America and their students to help them soar early on, to build the habits of mind, the kind of expertise, and the talents from the get-go. Beginning teaching is complex. You heard a number of areas of those complexities. But let me tell you one that I've honed in on. New teachers around October lose their confidence. They start to wonder if teaching is really the right profession for them. They worry that maybe they're a fraud and that they should give this up and they're not as good as anyone else and they're poor kids. And right about that moment, when they lose their confidence, kids see it. Kids are smart, right? And the more the new teacher loses his or her confidence, the more the students take advantage of that. And it's just at that moment when some new teachers in this country decide they're not going to teach any longer. You know, we really do lose 50% of all new teachers in the first 5 years. And there's a reason for it. We give them the sink or swim treatment, the toughest assignments in the toughest schools with little support and binders upon binders upon binders of what they're supposed to do. We're really good in our profession at giving the what, but we've not yet figured out the how. And that's what I want to talk with you about. So the best teachers, the greatest teachers in America, are made. They're not born. And we together can collectively think about how to actually develop our teachers. So I had this idea early on that if we could really accelerate teacher development and student learning, that we could do a much better job. And it didn't matter really where candidates came from. I know here it's fantastic to see the three universities collaborating, and I think it really makes a huge difference for students that are coming out and working in the field. But I'm sure in some of your schools you also get candidates that come in from other colleges or other states. And what's really important, that no matter where they come and no matter what their capabilities are, that we meet them where they are, we know our new teachers well, and we create interventions and differentiate the kind of help that we're going to give them. So let me give you an example of this for a second. Let's just say that you have a group of new teachers and you say to yourself, oh, all new teachers need help in classroom management. So you do one-size-fits-all professional development that I call pray and spray, that doesn't stick, and then you send them off. You feel good because you just did this training, but you send them off, and it's really difficult for us to transfer that learning into practice. So I kept thinking, how can I be responsive to the new teachers who call all the time, saying they wanted to quit in October? How could we do something different that wasn't one size fits all? And how could we honor and value talented teachers in America? Now, this is huge for me. Now, you heard the voice of Claire. We reach easily 6,000 expert teachers in America. There are so many expert teachers. To rigorously select them, to give them this role, is another way to lift their lives as well. So the way that the New Teacher Center thinks about this work is that we partner with a school district, so a shout out to my colleagues from Tulsa, and the mentors, actually. Why don't you stand up here? These are all the mentors that are here from Tulsa. It's like, wow. So we work with the district to really carefully select the most talented teachers. They're released full-time, and we train them. We give them professional learning opportunities. And these professional learning opportunities are not just get these great mentors and fill them up and send them off. This is really about bring the mentors together, give them 3 days of professional learning, have them go out and practice, come back into their mentor community, analyze what's working, what's not, look at their new teachers, assess which of their new teachers are at standard, above, below. How can I help this particular new teacher move her practice forward? What should we be doing with this fellow to move his practice forward? And as we think about that, the mentors are accelerating their development while the new teachers are on that path to excellence early. They're learning more, they're building the right set of habits of mind, and they're prepared to really meet the challenge of their students in the classroom. Students, however, are the primary beneficiaries of this model because those kids that get a brand new teacher can be guaranteed that they're going to be on that learning path from the get-go. I worry about this piece because in America, the same set of students, underserved students in this country, often get a new teacher every single year. That's a tragedy, right? And I'm hearing one of the new teachers who said something to the effect that the kids actually feel abandoned. And they have this snarky attitude, which I would have also. Like, you're the new teacher? Laura, well, you're not going to last either. Right? So I think that we want to be really assuring all kids that the adults are stable, caring, thoughtful, rigorous, engaged. And that just shouldn't be for my kid and your friends' kids. That should be for every child. The work we're doing, and I think Amy's here from Tulsa also, I think that in Tulsa we're seeing this. It's not just about one new teacher helping one new teacher advance his or her practice with Claire. It's about Claire and the new teachers in a school, connected to the vision and mission of the principal, partnering to align resources and engage in deeper conversations, and helping new teachers work in collaborative communities, professional learning communities, partnering with their colleagues. So it's more than just one-on-one mentoring. It's small group, whole school. And as you look, it's actually reaching school leaders, because when the mentors are trained to be able to do observations and give feedback, principals want that skill set as well. They're eager to also learn how they can do observations and offer feedback. And then the system starts to change. And I think we've had the pleasure of working with Keith Ballard and other colleagues, Jane Barnes, in Tulsa. And now not only are we helping new teachers, the 132, I think that Claire said, but we're also helping new principals. And just coincidentally and fortuitously, actually, for me, my colleagues from the New Teacher Center actually were in Tulsa yesterday and today, and I'd like my colleagues that are working in Tulsa to also stand up, please. It's great. Thank you. So as we're on this path, you can't do work like we're doing without collecting the metrics to show that you're having an impact. And you have to play in the metrics ballpark, right? So we've looked at 3 different areas for growth, right? Practice. Are we improving teacher practice? Now, that's really hard to know, but 93% of the teachers that we work with say that we're improving their practice, right? I mean, teacher efficacy, teacher voice, it's important to get teacher voice. How about on the retention side? Are we actually keeping teachers longer? In almost every city we're in, we're seeing a 20% bump in retention. And actually, I think in Tulsa, we're almost seeing a 30% bump. Now, in your state, in this state, we have to begin to not just recruit and hire, prepare, recruit, hire. We have to keep people and get them better. And we have to pay them more so they stay in this state and don't go over to another one. And then, so practice, improving practice and improving retention, those are 2 important areas. But we also have to be able to show that on a standardized test, we're able to also show gains in student learning. And through an experimental design with Mathematica, we were able to show that mentors who were mentored, new teachers who were mentored for 2 years, right? So our model is a 2-year program. New teachers who were mentored for 2 years actually showed statistically significant gains on standardized test scores in both math and in reading. So let me pause a minute to say something to you. You could say, well, your model is phenomenal, but we can't afford it. And I will say to you, you can't afford not to do this model or some other powerful model that ultimately helps teachers get better faster and keeps them longer. The financial gains and the student learning outcomes are huge. So I think that what I'm excited about in this room is that you have pre-service colleagues and deans and professors and teachers and principals and district level leaders and mentors and new teachers. We have all of us. I probably forgot someone. But the most important part of that is we have to be a collective to drive for policies in the state that ultimately will improve student learning, accelerate teacher growth and development. So one of the mentors, one of the new teachers in Tulsa, wrote that the structure of the program and the expertise of my mentor made it possible for me to set my goals, prioritize and work with specific data in order to plan my instruction to meet the needs of my learners. I learned how to apply what I know to a different group of students and how to be flexible enough to change my plans without stressing about it. So picture this. You're a new teacher. You close the door. We all close the door. You're in that room all by yourself with all those students, fabulous students. And you need to know how to teach those students. Who are they? And you heard Claire talk about that. Most important to us is who are our students and how do we actually differentiate and create interventions that meet the new teacher at the place where, at the students where they are to improve student learning. I'm also thinking of, as sometimes people say, well, who are the biggest competitors to the New Teacher Center? I find that question interesting, and you're going to find my answer interesting. The biggest competitors we find are school districts. School districts in America who say, we help our new teachers. You say, oh, what do you do? And they say, well, we have an orientation up front. We bring them together and we do an orientation. And then they say, and then we send them off and, we bring them together periodically. That doesn't change teacher practice. What I want to really emphasize is this mentoring, and I appreciated your comments. I mean, mentoring is hot right now. Teacher effectiveness is hot right now. But we don't really know what mentoring means in our profession yet. It's not just feel-good support. It's really about getting into classrooms, working closely with new teachers, and helping them move from good to very good to excellent with specific feedback. And I'm reminded of a comment when my son got his first job and he was evaluated, and he was actually with PricewaterhouseCoopers. He called to tell me that he got his first evaluation. He was so excited. I'd never heard anyone be so excited about an evaluation. And what I realized in listening to him is that he had explicit feedback on what his strengths were, on areas for growth, and opportunities for advancement. Now, I understand that in our profession we don't have very many opportunities for advancement, but advancement is intrinsic to us. It has to be about, our advancement is about improving student learning. And the only way we're going to do that is to really look for feedback from our teaching and engage really in ambitious, robust, thoughtful learning opportunities. That's what's going to keep the adults in Oklahoma focused on kids and impact. It's like a community of practice altogether. The other point I want to make is that it's back to this notion of the cost. One of the benefits that we've really seen in this work is what happens to the mentors. Now, I didn't get into this because of the mentors. I got into it for the teachers, right? For the new teachers that I knew. And also to try and build a better profession. But what I quickly saw was how excited and renewed and invigorated the mentors have become. Now, these are teachers that had taught 7, 15, 25, 30 years. And they were so excited to have been rigorously selected, appointed in, having this new opportunity. It's a new role in our profession. It's really expert teacher teaching new teachers how to teach, right? In a partnership, in a collaboration. And some of you, I had said this too earlier today, my idea here is also that school districts will create career lattices or ladders that give teachers more opportunities. In my decade, in my teaching, my friends taught forever. They taught in the classroom for 30 years. The generation of young people coming into our profession today are not going to be like that. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us to create career lattices, opportunities to step out of the class, come back to the class, step into being a principal, come back to being a teacher, step over here to direct curriculum, partner with the university to build out clinical experiences, come back, reciprocal arrangements where teachers can have more flexibility in their careers. You all know that it's not pay that teachers show up for. It is working conditions, it's collegial opportunities, it's learning with each other, it's having leadership opportunities, it's being acknowledged for what expert teachers know. So my real hidden agenda in the work is to elevate all teachers to ultimately be able to inspire young people. I would be remiss if I didn't focus a bit on the policy context in your state. Like, I'm driven to make sure that every new teacher in Oklahoma gets instructional support, not just a buddy, but instructional support. And, you know, at this point, I know that the House just passed the bill, which is 2855? 2885, thank you. 2885, which would actually restore the teacher residency program. And I want to say to you, restore it and add a second year, right? First year teaching alone, it's important to help first year teachers, but our study and several others in the country really show that it's in the second year that a teacher can make significant gains in student learning. And then finally, as you think about having the residency model restored, don't just say who wants to ment, but build out rigorous selection processes where you really are sure we're getting the most talented teachers with the best interpersonal communication skills, who have worked with diverse student populations, who know how to differentiate. I could go on and on. Really rock star teachers. And then make sure they have time to mentor, right? I mean, maybe you won't in all of your work go through it for a full release model, but at least figure out how to use time differently so that the mentors can have time to work with new teachers and it isn't late at night or during a teacher's prep. And now what I'd like to do is show you a short film that Davis Guggenheim put together from our work in Hillsborough. And Davis Guggenheim, you might remember, is the fellow that produced Superman. And I think actually he may have felt like what he really wanted to do was elevate teachers in this country. And so here's he's now has a new film called Teach, but here's a snippet, not from the film, but from footage that they captured in Hillsborough.
I feel like my job is trying to not only teach curriculum-based things, but also to be a life coach for them and to unlock their potential.
Jared Reed is a first-year teacher.
I want to make sure these kids learn. I want to be the best I can be at all times.
Chris Pettit is in his second year.
I was kind of overwhelmed first coming in. No, sit down, please.
Often, new teachers are alone and get limited professional guidance.
The average person does not know what it's like to be in this fire.
You kind of feel like you're out in the middle of an ocean by yourself, drowning. Ladies and gentlemen, stay focused. I took it personally, like maybe it's me, maybe I'm just not cut out to be a teacher.
Too many new teachers quit. Almost 50% leave the classroom within the first 5 years.
When you have new teachers come in, you put a lot of training into them, so you want them to stay around.
High turnover costs the nation $7.4 billion a year.
Turnover of teachers is really a crisis situation.
Kids have a relationship with the teacher, and when they lose the person they were connected with, it hurts them. I'm not just losing the teacher, I'm losing those kids.
We don't want to have teachers out on an island and they don't have any direction. We want to keep our teachers.
Mentors like Trinika are the solution. In Hillsborough County, every first and second year teacher gets paired with a mentor.
How's it going?
Going great.
This is my 13th year in education. I have 14 first and second year teachers.
I went to college on a baseball scholarship. When we had batting practice, our coach was a stickler. He was trying to train me out of my bad habits. Miss Thornton is my coach here. Miss Thornton is my mentor.
Only the best teachers are chosen to become mentors.
Once they're selected, they go into a training program that really helps them to become good mentors.
I'm sitting in my class trying to teach, and it'll be just like an outburst.
But you're going to get a negative number.
Does she normally wear sunglasses in class?
If it's not disruptive, then I'll kind of let it ride.
Okay. She is running the show.
You're going to get -25. Oh, you're going to get 125.
So what she told me to do is to get them more involved in my lesson. Oh my goodness, good job. Okay, now.
I come in and do classroom observations, questions that the students are asking, that the teacher is asking, the behaviors, how they're interacting with each other.
She's like really good. Like she sits in the corner with the laptop and she gets every word. I don't know how.
I just gather evidence. We look at the evidence and we talk about what could have improved the lesson or what went well in that lesson.
You're like CSI for teaching.
Yes, I am.
Crime scene investigator.
That's true. I like that.
The mentors provide the passion.
I like teaching. It's 24 hours.
And their cell phone numbers.
Yeah, I tell them, call me anytime. Email, yes. We text a lot.
You know, how about this? What do you think? Bouncing things off Trinika left and right. She's been my backbone.
I can't imagine doing this on my own without the kind of support.
I tell people that I don't feel like a second-year teacher anymore.
Since the mentor program started, new teacher retention has gone from 72 to 94%.
That kids want to be here and teachers want to work here.
All right, good job, ladies.
This is just one story of a school's success. Imagine if more first and second year teachers like Jared and Chris had mentors like Trinika. If we gave educators the support to teach the way forward and change America's classrooms.
We want our students to be lifelong learners, right? So as teachers, that's what we need to be.
Exactly.
So you could see that Jeremy and Chris were thriving by getting that kind of feedback, and I could see that the Tulsa mentors were shaking their head when they were 24/7 working with their iPhone and talking to everyone. I think there's a once-in-a-century opportunity now, and I want to tell you why, and I want to see if I can push you hard to drive for something more powerful in the state for new teachers. Okay, first of all, teacher effectiveness is on everyone's radar screen. Teachers matter. Everyone knows it. How are we going to help them get better? Teacher evaluation. We know that it's sort of our secret, isn't it, that our teacher evaluation systems historically haven't been very powerful. We're going to transform those teacher evaluation systems so that we can ultimately move teachers from good to very good to excellent, because it's all about feedback. Now we have Common Core. We're trying to implement Common Core across the country. We have greater technology, and we have an administration right now that is supportive of building out more opportunities for teachers and teacher effectiveness. So to me, you know, as each of you are involved in the various roles that you play, I hope more than anything that you'll push hard for greater opportunities for new teacher development. I know that at UC Santa Cruz, when I directed teacher ed, I rarely got to go out and see my graduates teach, right? I became very busy with my next group of students that I worked with. But you all in this partnership can actually listen and learn how well your graduates are doing, as did I, to ultimately improve teacher preparation while simultaneously advocating for graduates that are out teaching in your state. I think this reciprocal relationship between teacher ed and school districts is hugely important today as you try and build greater opportunities for new teachers. Let me just close by saying a few additional things. I had no privilege. I just had a good idea. I just stayed with the good idea like I was super tenacious that I believe that underserved kids in this country get the best education and should have an education like my kid. That's all that really drove me every day and still drives me every day. The second thing is I love teachers, and I told you why. I love teachers because I might have just gotten married and been a secretary. Now, some people are happy with that, but I'm so appreciative that a teacher helped to lift my life. I wanted forever to thank Miss Hayward for lifting my life. I had no idea where she lived, really. I had saved a letter that she sent me in 1968 when I graduated from high school, a letter that she'd sent me when I was studying in Mexico, telling me to behave myself, but also encouraging me to keep learning Spanish. So about a year ago, I finally just said, I'm tired of talking about looking for Miss Hayward and thanking her. I am going to find her. And I brought a wizard next to me who's really tech savvy, and she said something as simple as, "You tried to Google her?" Duh. So we Googled her, and we found a few Miss Ellen Haywards in California, and I thought that was a good bet. And I remembered being in high school and being 17, and she looked 22, so I figured we weren't that far off in age. And I found what looked like Miss Hayward. I was way more nervous calling her than I am right now. I felt like I was 16 or 17 or 18 again, and I held onto that phone, and I was actually shaking, and I heard this voice say, "Hello?" And I thought, oh, God, what am I going to say? And I said, "Hi, are you the Miss Hayward that used to teach at Monterey High, taught Spanish at Monterey High?" And I gave her the years. And this little voice said, "Yes, I did teach then." I'm like, oh, my gosh. And I screamed just like I was a teenager. Scream, "Oh, how fabulous." And I told her who I was. And, of course, she acted like she remembered me. I don't know if she did. But I said to her, "You changed my life, and I just called to say thank you." And then, of course, like you, I was super curious, like, where else did you teach? What have you done? And so I said, "How long did you teach? You know, what did you do?" And she said, "I only taught those 2 years that you had me because I thought I was lousy. It was the hardest job I'd ever done. I really didn't think I was very good, and so I quit." And you could have heard a pin drop. I was like, oh my. And I asked her, "What have you done?" And she said that she'd worked in the phone company arena with all the new cell phones and whatnot. And I thought, oh, what a shame. And now I'm going to call on you to think about together, Hannah, Ariel, Linda, and Laura. Do we want to lose them from this profession? No. They're smart. They're young. They're passionate. They care about being teachers. And the adults in the systems need to get it together to help new teachers be successful so the most underserved kids in this country can get a terrific education. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Miss Hayward, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the terrific support from the New Teacher Center colleagues all across America. We started at UC Santa Cruz. We spun out to be a national nonprofit 5 years ago. And it's the talent at New Teacher Center, all my colleagues who share a similar vision and can work in a respectful way with educators all across the country that's helped me be here before you. I want to thank them. I want to thank Miss Hayward. I want to thank my parents. And I want to thank you, John. Like, kids matter, right? Every kid, when they're born and when they're so little, they're so cute and so cuddly, and we all love them, right? We got to love them when they're big and when they get bigger and when they get even bigger. So thank you so much for this award. I appreciate it.
Maybe one of those. All of them are very worthy, but one of them, and you touched on this, but you said creating new paths for teachers, and you talked about that. That's one of your objectives. And since I'm in educational leadership, I won't take this personally, but it says, you know, it's for a person who maybe does not want to be a school principal or superintendent, but what are some alternative paths for teachers and who want to advance? And maybe what have you seen that districts are doing creatively to create new paths?
That's great. Well, I think that the work of mentoring provides a pathway. I think a lot of educators want to be teachers, and I actually think of being a principal as being a teacher. I wish we could kind of shake this up, right? Because that's why, Ed, you and I are connected, because we care about teachers and teaching and learning and leading. So I think that mentoring does provide an avenue for teachers who might want to stay in the sort of way that they think about teaching. I also think pre-service colleges and universities across America need clinical faculty that know teaching and learning. I think there's another opportunity. I think in terms of many districts have instructional coaches. I think that could be another pathway forward. I think we need to be creative and invent some new roles, ones that we haven't thought of yet. I haven't either, but I'm positive there must be other ways of constructing school and thinking about how to use our talents. You know, design thinking is a big deal in America today, right? But design thinking is what education needs. We need to be able to reinvent ourselves and pivot to really create these new opportunities for teachers and for leaders, because when someone's done principling, being a principal, where does he or she go, right? And I think we talked earlier today, it's not good to be all dressed up and nowhere to go. You have to have some career opportunities and pathways. So I think we should all be constantly thinking about what those can look like.
Thank you. I was talking to Cindy, who is sort of my right-hand person on this, and I put note to Cindy, next time we have Ellen speak, make sure we have tissue on every table. It's here, so. Now's a chance to talk more about Ellen's ideas, how they might apply to various contexts, particularly in Oklahoma. And so we have an outstanding panel here. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Robert Kahn Davis Undiano, goes by RC, serves on the executive committee of the Brock Prize and is the executive director of World Literature Today. He's also the Neustadt Professor of Comparative Literature and Presidential Professor of English. I also say, as I mentioned before, he's one of our board members, and he's one of the most creative people I know. It's always fun. If I have an idea, he's the person I go to expand the idea and bounce it off and for it to go places that I never even dreamed of. So I'd like to introduce you to the moderator, Dr. R.C. Davis.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to quit after those nice comments. What a great group, and I want to just thank you again, John Brock. You've heard this a few times, but thank you to you and Donnie for making this wonderful thing possible. Could we give them just another round of applause? It's so wonderful. This really is just a blue ribbon, wonderful panel to respond to Ellen Moyer and her wonderful ideas today. So my plan is to go ahead and introduce everybody. It'll take just a second. And then basically get out of the way. We can kind of work down the panel, get a comment as much as any person wants to say, and move on. And then once we've heard from everybody, go back to conversation, maybe a roundtable, questions you all have. I've got the iPad up here, and I can see your questions, and we'll just take it from there. Dr. Janet Barisi received a BA in Education at the University of Oklahoma. In 1974, she received an MS in Speech and Language Disorders at OU. Early in her career, Dr. Barisi worked in the Harrah and Norman public school systems as a speech pathologist. She then worked in the Department of Otolaryngology, ear, nose, and throat, at OU. At the OU Health Science Center in 1984, she earned a DDS degree and began practicing dentistry. Dr. Barisi established Oklahoma's first charter school in the Oklahoma City Public School District Independence Charter Middle School. A few years later, she started Harding Charter Preparatory High School. She assumed office as the current Oklahoma Superintendent of Public Education in 2011. Dr. Greg A. Garn is the Dean of the Janine Rainbolt College of Education, as well as the Executive Director of the K-20 Center for Educational and Community Renewal. Dr. Garn holds the Linda Clark Anderson Presidential Professorship and serves as Professor of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. Dr. Pamela S. Carroll became Dean of the Oklahoma State University College of Education in July 2012. She also currently serves as OU's Director of Professional Education and is the Stella V. Anderson Endowed Professor at the School of Teaching and Curriculum Leadership. Dr. Kara Gay Neal's professional experiences in urban education are extensive. Secondary school teacher, high school principal, school superintendent, the last elected school superintendent of Tulsa County. She also has been superintendent of Metro Tech in Oklahoma City and Tulsa Tech, which are Oklahoma's two largest career and technical educational districts in the state. And we have soon-to-be doctor, if we can put it that way, Juliana Kirshen. She's at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She is a PhD candidate in education, and we're really glad to have her as well. So if we could just start with a comment, as much as you want to say. We'll start with Dr. Barisi and just work our way down and then go to panel discussion and questions after that.
Well, thank you very much. And I do agree, it is an exciting time for teachers in the state of Oklahoma. If you consider the fact that the most important person in a child's life other than their parents is their classroom teacher. And one of the things that we know is that obviously the greatest impact you could have on a child is to assure that teachers are effective in their classroom and have what they need. Having said that, one of the things that we knew as I came into office and a suite of education reforms were passed, we knew it was time to hit the ground running and do whatever we could from our department to support and to do whatever we could to help teachers become more effective. And so the department was reorganized itself literally from a regulatory agency into one that is a service organization that is there really, if you really take a look at all the work we do, it's about helping teachers to learn and to be more effective. Everything from our regional trainings to the work of our REACH coaches that are instructional coaches and reading, and now to also to the work that we're doing that is ongoing in developing the teacher and leader effectiveness system. It is a system that is being designed with the thought that it is one to support teachers and to help them to continually improve their practice throughout their careers. I appreciate the comments about needing to develop more ladders and lattice works in education for teachers that don't want to leave the classroom. This is something we heard as well. Don't want to leave the classroom. Admire our school leaders, but I want to grow professionally. And we had the opportunity, time's running together, I think it was about a year and a half ago, to have the good folks out from the Milken Foundation. There's two sides to the Milken Foundation. Everybody's aware of the Milken Award for teachers. But on the other side, they work on teacher effectiveness and came out and presented to us their TAP system. And ultimately, the State Board of Education adopted it as one of the observational frameworks. Why is that important? Because if a district decides to use that, they can also use the Fuller program that does very much integrate those teacher ladders in there and opportunities for professional growth of teachers. Mentor teachers, lead teachers, coaches. And so it does respond to that desire of teachers. We had a couple of districts that called us and said they really wanted to take a good look at it. So we were very pleased, and the State Board of Education was pleased to adopt it now as an additional observational framework and opportunities for teachers. For me, I'll close with this. This is fun. I was on the OSU campus yesterday with Dean Carroll here, kicking off the OSU Teach program, and I'm just so excited for you all to hear about this wonderful, innovative program.
And so it's fun to be back on, but my campus today. But I was telling her about my family's involvement with OSU. I've got a nephew playing on the OSU baseball team. So hit a double home run Friday. Also, getting to observe the progress in Edmond, Oklahoma, and here at OU on the Urban Teacher Preparation Academy, and excited to have Kara Gay Neal talk to you about what's going on in Tulsa in urban education. Incredibly important program for our teachers that will really provide teachers with a lot of the tools they need to be effective in a challenging urban environment. But we're also excited today, and I guess Carrie White had the opportunity to tell everybody, and we're trying to be responsive to what you're recommending. So the state legislature today, the House passed 2885, House Bill 2885, that came out of our teacher shortage task force. And just really excited. What it does is it changes the definition a little bit of a mentor teacher to include support and coaching. It directs the Commission on Teacher Preparation to work with the state regions and institutes of higher education to establish at first a pilot program for a paid internship. And we are so very, very excited about that. We agree that teachers need internships. They need a longer period of time to develop their practice and to develop that very strong bond with a mentor. So that is exciting. Also developing residency committees and asking school districts to also support alternatively certified teachers with a residency program. And then just added a little something we asked for. We are doing an educator supply and demand study this year. It had not been done, I think, for 8 years? 2002. And we're asking that the state require it and fund it every 3 years. It's very important that we know where our teachers are, how many are being produced, but where they're going, what grade bands they're teaching in, what specialties, and what they're doing with their careers. So it'll be we have one going on right now that will more inform our practice and our future recommendations, but try to keep that going every 3 years.
So maybe just to connect into a couple of those ideas, I think we're sort of at this very interesting time, and Ellen alluded to this earlier in terms of the sort of inflection point that we're at with regard to education, where there's really some opportunities, certainly some challenges, but some opportunities to think about how we might do things differently. I think this panel is actually a great example of one of the strengths that this state brings, this idea of collaboration. And again, if you listen to a number of the conversations today, that's been a common theme. You don't go this alone. You don't succeed alone. The way that this stuff becomes successful is by sort of looking side to side, forward and backwards, and seeing what are we learning, what do we know, and how can we move this stuff. And so, the opportunity with this legislation as it passes through, if we are lucky enough to bring back the residency committees, not just replicating what we've done in the past, but this beautiful new opportunity to think about what could this look like. How could technology be envisioned? What have we learned from literally thousands of teachers and hundreds of thousands of students around the country being positively impacted through a mentoring program that we can apply to what we're going to potentially do here in the state of Oklahoma? And so I just sort of, to keep my comments very brief, I think that's maybe the spirit and the opportunity that we have here, is lots of people who care deeply about the learning that's going on in classrooms and how can we support teachers, whether it's our beginning teachers very powerfully in the conversation today, or our more senior teachers, right? Folks that have had that passion for a long time and have opportunities every day to get better. How can we structurally think about doing that? Again, not in that one-off solution, but much more consistently across different kinds of schools and districts.
And we're going to collaborate because Greg kept his comment short, so I can take some of his time. So thank you, Greg. I, first of all, really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to join with my colleagues from TU and OU. it's just fun to do this kind of event and to know that we are joining our voices for the sake, really, of our beginning teachers, prospective teachers, and current classroom teachers, because we're all working for the improvement of education in Oklahoma. So I thank you for that. Another group of our partners who kind of it goes unsung sometimes is our partnership with the Oklahoma Board of Regents. Our partners from the Board of Regents are always among us. I was recently at the American Association for Colleges of Teacher Education conference, and there they were for the whole conference, attending sessions, taking notes, learning about what's going on in the field. And I didn't see any other states groups doing that, and I think that speaks so well of us. We had probably the largest state contingent there, and I love that about Oklahoma, that we were there. A few things that I'd like to comment on about what's going on at OSU. As Dr. Barisi mentioned, OSU Teach, the hard work is just beginning. We had a big shindig yesterday on campus, and that was great fun. But the work will just begin to transform the way we teach math and science to present it to prospective teachers of math and science, to kind of invade the buildings of the colleges of arts and sciences, to talk to students who have come to campus thinking they want to be mathematicians and chemists, physicists, biologists, and geologists, and ask them one question: have you thought about teaching? And when they say, maybe, we've got them hooked. And we're able to bring them into education courses and immediately get them with practice, with support, with stipends, ding, 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 get them into elementary classrooms and then middle school classrooms and then high school classrooms so they learn about teaching and, as important as Ellen was saying earlier, about children and the developmental stages that children go through. But what I want to talk about now about that program that's so important to this conversation is that it would not be possible without two key features. One is the mentor teachers, and those are teachers who stay in the classrooms. And in this case, we will start with rural classrooms because that's where, as you know, Stillwater is situated. And then we will also expand into urban classrooms because we have the really beautiful situation of having strong connections in Tulsa and in Oklahoma City. So mentor teachers will be situated in those classrooms. They'll work with us in summer workshops to learn about the kinds of teaching approaches which will feature through the program. So it'll be professional development for the teachers, and then they'll go back to their schools and do their teaching, but also be partners with us. And they'll even get financial recognition for their work with us, because it will be demanding and it will be more extensive, and they'll be treated like professionals. You all will be. But we also will pluck out through a competitive process teachers who are called master teachers who come to campus and join our faculty. We're thinking we will have them join the faculty with their participation, their consent, for 3-year rotating terms. So somebody will come as a master teacher in the sciences, secondary sciences, and somebody secondary mathematics for 3 years and then go back into their school. So that's one of those lattice moves that Ellen was talking about. A master teacher will be very successful in his or her role in a high school teaching situation, very experienced, nationally board certified, a master's degree holder. So a really solid teacher who will work teaching university classes, observing our students before they go into those classrooms to teach, observing them in those classrooms. So a real liaison between the university courses in arts and sciences as well as in education and the public school classrooms, where they're going to spend a lot of hours doing very focused, not just numbers of hours, and this is what Greg was talking about earlier. It's not just about numbers of hours in classrooms, it's very purposeful hours. And one thing that I'm, and so those are critical roles for OSU Teach to work. a thing that I'm really excited about that has bubbled up from my colleagues in the college. So point number 2, I promise I won't talk anymore after I stop this. I'll just be quiet. But it's really exciting because this has come up from the faculty, and it flies in the face, really, of conventional practice at universities. And that is that we, in the College of Ed, particularly in the teacher preparation programs, are going to very intentionally hire more clinical faculty members. We have to. It doesn't fit what we do and must do to prepare teachers to hire more and more people for the traditional tenure track university line and say, well, you'll teach 2 or 3 courses and have this research expectation and this service expectation. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have 8 student teachers to supervise and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, where we need people who have had immediacy of experience in classrooms, whom we can borrow for 2 or 3 years from public schools and then send back into the public schools with renewed enthusiasm because they've worked with pre-service teachers. They've had an opportunity to learn and get re-jazzed about their job. Our students have benefited. So everybody grows in that kind of model. And we're starting doing that now. We've started that process both for our urban and our rural populations. And I'm really excited about that we have the freedom at OSU to make that decision to hire more clinical folks for our teacher preparation. And I love that, the lattice instead of just the ladder, because we do have that freedom. And so we'll call those teachers in residence. They'll be able to, we'll borrow them from the school system. They won't lose their retirement time. They'll be able to keep their retirement and go back into that system, keep their retirement and those kinds of things. We've worked it out. So it's just exciting. And the last thing I'll talk about, and then is the attention we're beginning to give, and Dr. Ed Harris was one of our prototypes on this. We're beginning to try to look at how teachers and teacher leaders, principals, are addressing some of the same crucial issues, but traditionally, teachers have learned about things like how to make sense of all the data that they're getting from the state and other places, and principals have learned about how to make sense of all the data they're getting, and they've learned about it from different angles and with different emphases. We're pulling together classes, and Dr. Carrie White has helped with this too, has been a co-instructor. We're pulling together our teacher prep students and our educational leadership students so that prospective teachers and practicing teachers and practicing educational leaders are learning together about how to use data to make informed decisions for students, for school improvement, and other school development issues. And we're really excited about that because there are some conversations where the playing field needs to be level. And where the information needs to be shared instead of kind of a seesaw. So those are 3 things that are going on that we're really excited about that may not be exactly about mentoring, but kind of share this thread of how we're kind of spreading the information to benefit our students and teachers and schools.
That won't be your last word. I know she'll say other stuff too. This whole idea, though, of creativity and being inspired today to think about how this can be enriched and expanded. The University of Tulsa changed its name from the School of Education to the School of Urban Education about 3 years ago. And it did it with the intent that every classroom today is an urban education classroom. There isn't a rural school, there isn't a suburban school that does not have a diversity of socioeconomic groups in its classes, diversity of languages in its classes, diversity of learning levels, and the ability to meet that individualization is the challenge of the future in education. You know, we're finding, too, that the term urban education is one that has, as much as some people initially, I've even had parents say, I don't know that I want my child going into an urban classroom. The reality is their child is probably coming from an urban classroom, whether that they are at a private school or a high-end, again, suburban district. Jenks Public Schools, which is a Baldrige winner. There aren't many public schools in the nation that have Baldrige awards. They have over 300 Zuni Burmese speaking children in their schools today. Now that's because a small church began to help people get out of Myanmar, which used to be Burma. They were unprepared for it. They were also unprepared to go from a 58% free and reduced meals to now nearly 68 to 69%. And of course, Tulsa Public Schools is practically all free and reduced. Everybody in one way or another is an urban classroom. And every teacher, I think that we kind of also grew up with something that is always been a distortion of the profession. You grew up hearing people say, those who can do, those who can't teach. Well, we figure, especially if you're an English teacher, that not only did they drop off the sentence, but they also didn't punctuate it correctly. Those who can do and those who can't teach wish they could. We are getting really significant numbers wanting to come back into the schools. That's what alternative education is. It's people who want to be in the schools. It is a responsibility that we have to make sure that there is a quality that is going into those classrooms for whatever length of time. We talked about it this morning. The debate is over. It's not, are we going to have alternative certification in our classrooms? They're there. And the important thing then is to make sure that the students still have the richest experience. For that, we need greater support from our state legislators to say at least you need to have 12 hours, 13 hours, 15 hours of these fundamental things as established by the State Department. We can say we know what is the pedagogy that everybody ought to have to create a lesson plan. But those are the kinds of things that we as, I think, higher education have a responsibility to make sure are even following up with our own graduates. These two lovely, brilliant young women have made me feel so guilty today. We're not following up from the School of Urban Education at TU with our own graduates. They're out there, and yes, I came through the period of time where we had 2-year licensing, and we had, you were paid to be an administrator who went out from the university, who went out from your principal's office, and for 2 years we had licensure in this state. But what happened was, of course, the money evaporated. It was a good idea, but there was no money. Today, we pay a supervising teacher in a classroom for one of our very good, and we have great students at TU, I will tell you, just by the admissions policy alone coming into TU. We have great students going out into the schools, but we also have students that are going into classrooms where we thought we had a good supervising teacher. And I go in and follow up and observe it, and our very good students are going into classrooms where an adequate teacher is supervising those students. And they walked into a very lax discipline environment, and our very good students are caught in the situation of having to maintain a less than appropriate environment. And that's a handicap. That's one hand tied behind their back. So one of the things I've already decided today that we're going to do is work with Jane Barnes, who is the lead contact for the mentor teachers from the new Teacher Center. And I help them, not only are they working with new teachers, but I can guarantee you they know who are the best teachers in every one of the schools they go into. And I want to know who they are so that that's who we can assign our students to. We have a situation where we can't, I don't think, we pay ours, you can have an hour of college credit, or basically for 7 weeks, we switch them between, as I'm sure you all do, if they're secondary, half in the middle school, half in the high school, or lower grades and upper grades, a whopping equivalent of $38 a week we pay those supervising teachers to supervise our brilliant students. Babysitters make more in a week. Those are the kinds of inequities we really cannot sustain in a profession that wants to call itself a profession. So to go back, though, to the thing that I think is so important is that whenever we say we're going to do everybody has an orientation to their freshman year. And for the first time, we're putting into our arts and science. We're in the College of Arts and Science. We are not a separate college, but we are the largest program out of 15 divisions in the College of Arts and Science. We are not diminishing. We are growing. And when we meet with those students for that orientation for 1 hour a week, the first semester of their freshman year, every division is supposed to give their division a title to the courses. It's basically information about the university and testing and that kind of thing. We title ours, or we're going to title it for the next fall semester, Guaranteed Global Job. Because teachers are a hot commodity. This state may not realize it, but everybody else out there, corporate, universal, foreign countries, teachers are, especially an American trained teacher, is a hot commodity. And the states that do not recognize that are going to lose big time. So I applaud you for making our teachers better and stronger.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. That's a great transition to what I'd like to say. And I think that what we've heard are these amazing opportunities that higher education is creating for our young teachers and for teachers to return and to shift their careers and to be continuous learners. And my experience as a researcher who has focused the last 3 years on mentoring and induction, and I really look at it from a fine-grained perspective. So the two things I want to share with you, I don't think will come as any surprise given we've spent all day hearing Ellen talk about and share her stories about why this work is so important. But I think the power of mentoring and the power of these opportunities that our higher ed colleagues are talking about lies, for me, in two things. And one is it makes explicit the message that learning to teach is developmental and it's situated. And too long, we have just let that be an invisible message. We've implied that, from higher education or from training programs that it's developmental. You're a continuous learner. You're a lifelong learner. But we have, for whatever reason, been really, I don't know if afraid is the right word, but we haven't been brave enough to stand up and say, yes, learning to teach is developmental. And you're always learning to be a better teacher. And we have to do that. We have to be the profession that says, I always want to get better. I mean, can you imagine going to a doctor and that person saying, well, I haven't seen a case like yours in 20 years, but I'm still an expert on it. I haven't read a journal. I haven't, gone to a meeting. I think I would slowly back out of that person's office with my special condition, right? But yet we expect teachers to just be great. No. And so that powerful piece that we send the explicit message that learning to teach is developmental. We're always getting better, and we've heard that all day. But it makes it clear. And second, that learning to teach is situated. Policy is awesome. And I'm convinced that systemic and comprehensive structures are the way to move this work forward. However, I also know that the real work of teaching, and we heard this from all of these teachers today, it happens in the nuance, right? It happens in the situation. It's situated work. It happens in your classroom. And so we can't set up professional learning communities and communities of practice and mentors with beginning year teachers, if we don't recognize that what I do in my classroom with my students isn't necessarily going to be exactly the same as what you do in your classroom with your students, because true differentiation means I know my kids as whole people, which is what we heard today, right? That it's holistic. We know them as individuals. We assess their strengths. We build on those. It's asset-based. It's not about, oh, here are your deficits. I have some scores. I looked at the data. Here's what you don't have. No, it's here's what you have, right? And we build on those strengths. And so it's situated. The second piece that I want to share that I think is so important about all of these programs, and then especially powerful about mentoring work, is that mentoring work, when it's truly instructional mentoring, right? When it's focused on the real work of teaching, I think that that work makes explicit the importance of a cognitive stance towards teaching that is genuinely curious about the minds of children. I mean, what's greater than having that genuine curiosity about the minds of children and then harnessing that curiosity and saying, I'm going to use that information to drive my instruction, right? And so a cognitive stance, like an approach to your work that says, I'm going to ask questions about what kids are doing in my class, right? And I'm going to have someone who's more senior than me or more expert who has a special way of looking at the work come in and help me do that. And so I think all teachers need this kind of mentoring. All teachers need this kind of instructional improvement. And that's why we have to make sure that even if we don't have state policies that happen, if the bill doesn't pass, or even if we don't have the money, that if you are a school leader, whether you're school-based or whether you're district-based, that you decide that what you're really going to do is lead this work from a frame that builds on the strengths of students and harnesses the power of your teachers and keeps it focused on building student learning from those little nuanced moments to the big goals that we want to set for ourselves. And to me, that's really what data-driven instruction means. That's really what differentiated instruction means, because equity doesn't mean everyone gets the same, right? Equity means people get what they need. And we need to start giving kids what they need, and we need to be giving teachers what they need. And I think that that's the power of mentoring.
I'm not seeing questions on my iPad here. Maybe some spontaneous questions just from the floor? Somebody on the panel? Looks like you have a question.
I think one of the best ways to avoid bureaucratizing, and I like that term, is to constantly measure our results, measure our effectiveness, and be willing to cast off those things that don't work. So as we try to do our work centered around building teacher effectiveness and teacher capacity, there's some things that don't work. But then there are some things that we have done that have been extremely helpful, extremely helpful. My frustration is there's not enough of us for all of the teachers. And so we also work very, very hard to research and to find new opportunities, new approaches in professional development. The state this last year provided $4.2 million to go out to districts. That's not very much money for 534 school districts. But to provide money that would really supplement. So the theory behind that is that we were going to do our best from the department with our budget to try to serve as many that we can, to do the work we could, but we also knew that districts had their own particular needs, their own special needs, and that we wanted to be able to provide that money so districts could pick that up. One of the things that we haven't done that really, yesterday as I was sitting in the ceremony celebrating OSU Teach is really increase that collaboration for professional development, or work with all of our teachers, colleges, and our research universities to perhaps leverage the knowledge and the ability to develop more professional development programs. Dr. White is beginning the work. I asked her to do this, I guess, about a year ago. We talked about doing it, and she is going into the different teacher colleges and beginning the dialogue to find out about their programs, to talk about what we're doing, and to see what we can do to inform each other's practice. So it's evaluation, casting off what doesn't work, admitting it, and focusing on those things that can work, knowing that we do as best as we can, but we have a limited reach, and so trying to figure out what the districts can do themselves to support.
I think that's a sort of a powerful way forward. And again, I think that the power of higher ed is we are especially good at the sort of collection, analysis, and making meaning of data. And so that data piece is a really powerful leverage to say what's working and what's not working. And again, in the spirit of the work that you have been committed to, I see that as sort of a core foundation, right? I mean, if there's some things that just don't seem to be working, how do we look at it from a different angle? And as I'm sort of reflecting, I'm looking back at Mr. Brock back here. I think about the success that he's had in oil and gas. And there's a metaphor that continues to sort of influence the way that I think we might begin to look at schools. And so if you think about the sort of energy revolution over maybe the short term, the last decade in this country, one of the things that I think they have been terrifically good at is looking at a pile of rocks and asking the question, how do we unlock this carbon? And the traditional answer was we go vertically. Well, somebody actually collected some data on saying, what happens if we go horizontally? And lo and behold, rocks that we saw as worthless are suddenly worth an amazing amount of, there's an incredible value there. And I think there's an opportunity to sort of look at a lot of our again, I'm sort of quoting a powerful idea that Ellen had this morning about sort of unlocking the potential of our teachers and thinking about how do we use that metaphor to think about this incredible opportunity that we have with new teachers to unlock that potential and really release that innovation. What does that look like? And if there are sort of traditional strategies that are getting in the way, how do we pull those out? How do we pull those out and sort of put in some new opportunities to do it? So again, in a state like Oklahoma, where energy is critically important to a lot of the ideas that we think about, how can we learn from some of those innovations and sort of apply those same principles to to education? I've told a story in a couple of places. I'm originally from Iowa, and so I follow agriculture very closely. And if you look at the growth that we've seen in agriculture over the last 50 years, you've seen some amazing things. So this is going to win you trivia every time you play Trivia Pursuit. But a cow today produces 5 times more milk than it did 50 years ago. An acre of corn yields about 120% more than it did 50 years ago. Wheat is up about 250. I mean, you just look at one after the other of these agricultural areas, and it's actually the second leading sector of our economy over the last 25 years. So what's the secret to agriculture? And if you actually look at the research, there's a couple of common ideas there. One of them is technology. If you think about the technology of the seeds that can resist drought, or the technology of the tractors that are now much more efficient. A second one is a fundamentally organized research agenda. So it wasn't just Oklahoma County farmers. It was actually the extension agencies across an entire state or region came together to collect data to get some insight on what was working and what wasn't working. And the third core idea that pushed that forward is farmers collaborating, right? We can talk about at the coffee shop what the local team is doing or what what's going on with the weather, but if we begin to talk about what we're seeing in our fields and how that maybe relates to what's going on in yours, that explains that dramatic leap forward. And so again, as we look to some other sectors, I think we can learn some of those lessons, apply them to education, and get that same leap forward.
Can I do a quick advertisement? And this ties in with STEM education. Very quickly, this is an appeal to teachers in the room and teachers that might be listening in. Two very talented individuals in our department, our curriculum directors for science and for secondary mathematics, Levi Patrick and Tiffany Neal, have developed over the last year, and we're nearing the completion of the first year of OK Sci and OK Math. And it is fashioned by those of you that know about Leadership Oklahoma, sort of along those lines, in that the teachers that were selected for this applied for it and went through a selection process and meet periodically throughout the year. I think they've had about 8 meetings. And during that, they explore specific areas of their subject matter. And it's based on the assumption that within them right now, every teacher has incredible amount of innovations within each of them. And that simply has to be encouraged out of there and translated to that practice. And so you can call it a leadership program if you want. I call it one of the best creative and idea developing programs. I mean, even after the first year, we're beyond our expectations. We're going to be opening up applications for the second year. And essentially what I want to end up doing with this is do paid positions through the summer for the teachers that finish OK Sci and OK Math, and for an additional 6 weeks to actually put meat on the bones of the individual ideas and the projects that they have and develop those and develop a system for dissemination to teachers throughout the state. OK Sci and OK Math. Get on our website and take a look at it. Thank you.
I'd like to do a follow-up question. We're all encouraged by HB 2885, so far so good. In your sphere of concern, area in which you act, what would be the burning priority for you, or something that needs to be done in your area next up? What's the burning priority in your area?
I think that if a new policy statement were to come from the state that said that mentoring work is important and that we value it and that teacher development is important, then I think that all school districts and district leaders need to take the opportunity to create a portfolio of teacher development for all of their teachers. And so although that may not be a part of that House Bill 2885, I think that they need to see that as an opportunity to create and differentiate the professional development, so that way they say, yes, we're going to do these things to support our beginning year teachers, but when they also create, as Ellen said, rigorous selection criteria for who the mentors are going to be, as they decide what mentor training should look like and they begin to do that training, those pieces are part of a larger scope of the work that says this is our portfolio of talent development. We have these staff members and we're going to create jobs where those people are successful, rather than saying we need to start getting rid of this person and getting rid of that person. Rather look at it as we're going to create the people we want for the jobs that we want. And so really looking at it from an asset perspective, as an opportunity to build all of our teachers, improve all of our teachers, and to tighten up and tightly couple the constructs of selection, of training. And I don't mean training as in, you go to this workshop, but ongoing, continuous improvement where people are really learning how to look at their practice and look at it formatively. I'm not talking about looking at, I got this summative data from a test score, all my kids did these DRAs, and now I'm going to look at it. That's helpful information for identifying some strengths and needs that students have, but that's actually not as helpful in informing my instruction as formative data that I get every day in my classroom. And so teaching teachers to learn how to track what's happening in their classrooms and ask really powerful questions. And I think that kind of that mindset of continuous improvement driven by formative data, in addition to summative data, within this big framework of a portfolio of developing all of our teachers to be the best that they can be is what has to happen, because otherwise we'll get what I think we have seen in many places around the country, or we're going to get some powerful mentoring programs, some not so powerful mentoring programs, but we're still going to have the bulk of our teachers not growing. We're going to have rock star beginning year teachers, some rock star mentors, but the bulk of our staff aren't going to be growing, and we want to have this growth trajectory of improvement in all of our classrooms.
I'm still a real Johnny One Note on this. I've been in Oklahoma education for so long, and I'm tired of hearing you can't throw money at it. Yeah, you can, because you haven't thrown it in so long that if really good people like Hannah, it doesn't have to come always in the form of salaries, but she is a reading, writing teacher with an overloaded class. Now, that's going to drive her out more than the lack of money, is the lack of resourced work environment and the lack of salaries. And if we don't quit playing this game where we give lip service and no hip service of pulling the billfold out and paying for it, Oklahoma will be the bottom of the barrel. We already are. So, you cannot still keep ignoring that money makes a difference in any profession out there. And we are talking about professional equivalencies. We're so far beyond that, and yet we are every bit as professional as doctors, lawyers, engineers. But we are a commodity that is desired elsewhere, and we may have to take it elsewhere before they appreciate it at home. So I hate that. I have been in Oklahoma all my life, but it is a state that does not reward its talent, and we can't keep it up. So that's my number one concern. It always is. I'm sorry to be so insistent about it.
I prevaricate. I have to say something else. I read a really interesting overview of studies about induction that was in Journal of Educational Research, I think. It was Ingersoll and Small in 2011. In that article, Ingersoll was talking about the fact that beginning teachers, between 2087 and 2007, think about that 20-year chunk. In 2087, 50,000 beginning teachers. 20 years later, guess how many? 200,000. 4 times as many. So teaching, the profession of teaching has a bimodal age distribution. There are a boatload of beginning teachers and a boatload of older teachers. Not a lot in the middle. Okay? The most unstable population in the teaching profession is the beginning population. They're the most likely, as Ellen pointed out today, to drop out within the first 5 years. Since that's true, not if, but since that's true, and since most beginning teachers tend to report that they drop out because of lack of support and school work conditions, or in general work conditions, then I would suggest that one thing that we need to do is in Oklahoma, as part of the new House bill, when implemented, is really hunker down and address those conditions. So when we talk about looking for markers for teaching effectiveness and those other kinds of conditions that we might be able to collect data on, let's also look at other conditions that we use to evaluate what's going on in classrooms and teachers' lives so that we can look at retention of teachers. What are we asking about the teacher's work condition? Are we asking whether or not teachers are having an impact, for instance, on children's citizenship? Are teachers becoming advocates for their students or for themselves? Are they using critical thinking in their own work? Are they teaching critical thinking? Are they promoting compassion and caring? I mean, it's not all about test scores, and that's not all the life of a teacher. None of us entered teaching because we love giving tests or we love giving test scores. We entered it because we love the human part of teaching. So I think thinking about that as we talk about not only the teaching effectiveness, but the retention part of induction programs is hugely important and not to be lost with this new opportunity.
Ed, do we have time for one more question, one more comment?
I'll maybe take a first crack at it, and then I'll turn it over. So as somebody who's studied educational accountability for about 15 or so years, I think one of the things that we need to, that I would suggest that we've learned from a number of studies in a number of places over a number of years is this idea that accountability is not monolithic. So right now, there's certainly some conversations about what I would call market accountability, the idea that as a parent, I have some choices and I make some decisions based on where I want my child to go. But what I would do is sort of throw out a couple of other ideas of accountability that I think when you weave them together provide a much stronger basis for schooling than if we rely solely on one. And so another marker of accountability is performance, right? We collect lots of data, and hopefully that data just doesn't go outwards, but we actually have the opportunity to reflect inward and use that data as an opportunity to get better, whether it's a classroom, a school, a district, whatever that level is. I would argue another sort of a hallmark, not always bad, it can be, but is bureaucratic accountability. Right? And so if you think about the way in which we determine whether some things are happening or not happening, clearly fit under that bureaucratic. If it's solely bureaucratic, I think we've got lots of data that shows that that's not particularly effective as well. What I would argue that the model of accountability that I think has the most potential going forward and hopefully continues to expand, Ellen mentioned this earlier, would be professional accountability. The idea that my colleagues, I look to the right and to the left, to the classrooms within this building, and we're holding each other accountable. It's not somebody outside, it's that mix of inside. We care deeply about this work, and we're going to hold one another accountable, work with each other to get better and to make sure that we're meeting those goals. And so the metaphor that I'd sort of leave you with is a single strand is going to break or snap. But if you can weave a couple of those ideas together, you get a much more comprehensive system of accountability that sort of takes the strengths of each of those and puts them into a system rather than solely relying on one of each of those.
With that, I think did you want to add something real quick?
Well, just to build on what Dean Garn's saying, that when we're given, we have certain policy and market constraints, and then we have a profession with a history of valuing egalitarianism, where everyone's the same, right? So that fights against that career lattice and that career ladder, and that's the history and a valued history in American education. And a second piece of that is autonomy. We have valued historically the fact that you can go, shut the door, and do whatever you want. And so we have people that have come into the profession, and so who have seen that or have an understanding that that's what the work is about. And so we're given these two, constraint systems that we're working with. But I think that building on this idea of professional accountability, what that really is to me, and this is where mentoring, to me, is the most powerful piece. Mentoring across the scope of a multi-stage career, right? That it's not just my first 2 or 3 years, that it happens across my career, is that true mentoring in schools where we really study each other's practice builds collective responsibility. So it's not my class had high test scores, it's our children are getting better. All of us are working together collectively, and we share this professional accountability. And so, yes, we have these constraints that we're working against, but I think we can push collectively against those constraints as we continue to empower ourselves to say, we're really about the work, and our work is about serving kids and families.
On that strong note, please join me in thanking the panel for this great discussion. Thank you all.
That'll be fine. And I just have some very quick closing remarks. I want to thank you for coming. This is exactly what we want to showcase an idea and see how it can be used and explore that idea. I have a few people to thank. Dr. Jim Pappas, who made this possible. I think he's out, like I said, he's has other things to do. Emily Bozak, Amy Patterson, Angela Nicholson, Ray Leva, Kevin Lau, Kevin Garling, Kristen Kohlmeyer, Pedro Kalaman, Jake Maurer, Uriel Yisrael, and Brian Bowden. Okay, and those are people that, just a few of the people that made all of this happen today. I especially want to thank 3 people that worked day and night together on this collaboratively. They probably far excelled their texting, whatever package you have. But Emily Leyenbauer, thank you so much. Missy Mitchell, who is the coordinator here at OU, I thank you so much. Where's Missy? Is she? She's out coordinating something already, I guess. So. And the person that helps me also and is also, someone asked if, what is the team like? Well, it's Cindy Schaefer and me. That's the team. So Cindy, thank you. And one, if you don't mind, please, we are so honored to have Ellen as a laureate, so please give her one more round of applause. Thank you again for coming. Drive safely, and see you next year at University of Tulsa. All right.